It was crowded, but they found 2 seats in the back. A few minutes later, a tram violently hit the bus. The bus seemed to bend impossibly. Then it burst into a million pieces. The metal handrail broke violently, and it impaled Frida, just like a sword.
Her name was Greta. When Greta was around 10 years old, her teacher showed the class a documentary about the Great Garbage Patch. Greta learned about plastic materials that toppled off shipping containers. Those plastic fragments were picked up by ocean currents and swirled together to form an island of trash the size of Mexico. Some students felt moved. Others' attention wavered. Greta could not look away. She thought, that can't be right. No way there is something serious enough to threaten our very existence. When the film was over and the lights clicked on, Greta's classmates were already standing, pulling on their jackets and chattering away. Greta stayed seated, unaware that it was lunchtime. The cafeteria was serving hamburgers. Greta could not stomach the thought of eating one. It was a ground-up piece of muscle from a living creature with feelings, consciousness, and a soul, she said. And when she wasn't thinking of the cow, she remembered the island of trash. As others put out their phones and started swiping, Greta cried and wanted to go home. In that moment, she couldn't quite understand how everyone went back to life as usual.
England had the strongest army in the world. They had thousands more soldiers than the Maroons did. Plus, a practically endless supply of guns, bullets, and food to keep their soldiers strong. But the Maroons had something far more powerful on their side. They had Nanny. She was a small woman with eyes that looked so intensely upon people that it was as if they pierced the skin. And she was immensely powerful. Since retreating into the mountains, the Maroons had used their survival skills to hunt, create villages, and organize themselves in battle when the English intruded on their territory. But none were as brilliant at military strategy as Nanny. When she offered advice, everyone listened, especially Quao, the top military commander of the Maroons in the Eastern Mountains.
Let me explain. Being deaf meant that Ashley had to do some things differently than other riders. She couldn't hear a challenger coming up behind her, so she watched the shadows on the track to see if someone was approaching. She couldn't listen for changes in the engine to know when to shift gears, so she felt for subtle vibrations in her bike to sense the gear shifts that would make it go faster. When Ashley got ready for a race, she pulled on thick canvas and leather pants to protect her legs from the heat of the bike's engine, and a long-sleeved jersey to guard her arms from the rocks kicked up by other riders' wheels. She laced up steel-toed boots and tucked her long, blonde hair into a helmet that covered her face, with a brace protecting her neck. Every weekend, the Fioleks joined hundreds of spectators to watch Ashley compete, anxiously awaiting daring jumps, breathtaking speeds, and equally spectacular wipeouts.
When the planes took off, the Sherpas moved aside so Junko and her fellow climbers could see the spectacular scene below. In the far distance, 3 peaks came into view. Annapurna 3 was in sight. Once they progressed up the mountain, snow changed everything. The color green was entirely gone, replaced by a solid sheet of white. Between the snow and the fog blanketing everything in white, the summit felt out of reach regardless of how far they traveled. Technique became even more precise as the ridge they climbed narrowed to a knife edge. There was no room for error. A step slightly too far right or left would mean a fast track to death. As the crew climbed higher, Junko had to tell herself, it's okay, to manage her fears. Then, through a brief opening in the fog, Junko saw the summit. They had done it. Next one is Everest, Junko heard a teammate say. She had been considering the same objective since their return.
Once upon a time, there was a girl who lived in a stone castle near the sea. She was a pirate, and her name was Grace. Grace was born around 1530. Her family lived in Clew Bay, a beautiful spot on the west coast of Ireland that looked out into the sea. The rocky coast surrounding the bay was really dangerous to navigate, but the O'Malleys were a seafaring clan. For centuries, the family ships had ruled those waters. They fished for herring, cod, and salmon. They traded furs and hides from Ireland with merchants from Scotland to Spain. And they were pirates. Whenever they crossed a boat, or whenever they saw a castle on the coast, the O'Malley's ships descended on them and stole all they could before sailing away as fast as they'd come. No one could pass their waters without paying the family a toll. The O'Malleys were a fearless and fearsome people.
Ada was merely explaining Charles's designs for it, but Ada could imagine exactly how Charles's invention would work. As Ada studied his plans, she could almost hear the whirring clicks and clacks of this huge, beautiful machine. She could almost see the thousands of interlocking metal gears, towers of them side by side. Ada pictured herself standing next to the analytical engine, which would probably be a whole head taller than her, and she peered into the inner workings. Her notes grew and grew, and soon they were longer than the article itself. Ada and Charles went back and forth about her notes. She sent him questions and drafts, and he'd return his notes.
In 1909, Maria's father, Jose, moved their family from Portugal to Brazil, where he opened a barbershop. Maria's mother worked in a bustling boarding house. With 6 siblings running around, their little apartment on a narrow cobblestone street in Rio de Janeiro was always filled with laughter and chatter and music. Even when there wasn't very much money, there was always music in the Miranda household. Jose loved opera. His favorite was called Carmen, which was about a rebellious young woman from a poor neighborhood. Jose saw a spark of that strong-willed character in his music-loving daughter. He had no idea that Maria would one day use the name Carmen to defy his wishes and follow her dreams onto the stage.